Breaking point. The moon glowed. Not with its usual reflected sunlight, but with an artificial radiance that made it look like a second sun in Earth's sky. Dr. Ven's insane plan had transformed Earth's satellite into the largest communications array ever created, using hastily applied reflective coatings and repurposed mining lasers to turn the entire lunar surface into one massive signal amplifier. Kraxan war fleet emerging from FTL, Rodriguez announced. 417 ships. They're everywhere. The tactical display showed humanity's worst nightmare, an armada of warships surrounding Earth in a perfect sphere of destruction. But Sarah Chen wasn't looking at the enemy fleet. She was watching the other display, where millions of green dots represented active connections to Earth's gaming servers. "How many players do we have?" she asked. 200 million and climbing, Rodriguez replied. The streaming networks are calling it the biggest multiplayer event in history. Sarah nodded. Send the signal. Across Earth, millions of gamers who thought they were participating in a special event received their real mission briefing. Their controllers weren't connected to a game, they were now piloting actual drones, maintenance pods, and civilian vessels that had been modified according to their usual gaming preferences. The Kraxan war fleet's commander appeared on the main screen, resplendent in battle armor. "Surrender now, and we will make your extinction quick." Sarah smiled. "Counteroffer, look up." The moon flashed. The reflective coating Dr. Ven had applied wasn't just for show, it turned the entire satellite into a giant signal mirror, amplifying Earth's transmissions to unprecedented levels. Before the Kraxan fleet could react, their ships were bombarded with data. Not weapons, not energy beams, but pure information. Millions of contradictory commands, impossible tactical patterns, and most importantly, the combined creative chaos of humanity's greatest gamers. Each ship's computer systems tried to process the flood of data, tried to find logical patterns where none existed. "Now," Sarah commanded. "Everyone, execute your favorite winning strategy." What followed defied conventional military analysis. Cargo ships performed maneuvers from popular racing games. Mining drones attacked in formations borrowed from fantasy RPGs, maintenance pods darted through space using tactics developed for first-person shooter games. The Kraxan fleet, programmed for military precision, couldn't adapt fast enough. Their targeting systems, overwhelmed by trying to predict logical patterns in the chaos, began to fail. Ships collided as they tried to follow multiple contradictory readings. "Fascinating," Ixel breathed. "You're not fighting them, you're overloading their ability to understand what they're fighting." "Phase 2, Sarah ordered. Dr. Ven. The sabotaged mining drones, now under Kraxan control, suddenly activated their modified programming. Instead of attacking Earth's forces, they began broadcasting complex mathematical problems, the kind of puzzles humans created for fun but that AI systems had to solve methodically. "Their quantum processors are completely occupied," Vextal reported, watching his readings in amazement. "They're being forced to solve millions of unnecessary calculations." "Final phase," Sarah commanded. "All units, execute Operation Checkmate." The civilian fleet, which had been holding back, suddenly surged forward. But instead of attacking, each ship launched what appeared to be small satellites. Hundreds of them, then thousands, creating a web of interconnected points around the Kraxan fleet. "What are those?" the Kraxan commander demanded. "Gaming routers," Sarah replied. "Normally used to reduce lag in online games. But when you link enough of them together and pump enough power through them, the web activated." Space itself seemed to shiver as the improvised network created a massive field of localized interference. The Kraxan fleet's sophisticated targeting systems, already struggling with data overload, completely failed. "Last chance," Sarah offered. "Surrender, or learn why humans create games that are literally impossible to win." The Kraxan commander looked at his fleet, mighty warships reduced to confusion by an enemy that refused to fight according to any recognizable rules of warfare. This is not combat. This is madness. No, Sarah corrected. This is humanity. We turned our entertainment into weapons, our games into tactics, and our entire moon into a communications device. Imagine what we'll do if you actually make us fight seriously. The surrender took less than 10 minutes to negotiate. Later, as Earth celebrated and the combined Kraxan fleets withdrew, Ixil approached Sarah. You knew, didn't you? About the saboteurs, about the war fleet. You planned for this. Sarah shook her head. We didn't plan, we prepared. Humans have been imagining alien invasions for centuries, creating stories, games, and simulations. We didn't know what form the threat would take, so we prepared for everything. Your empire wanted to study human adaptability. Well, you just saw our greatest adaptation. We turned our imagination into our strongest defense. As they watched the moon slowly return to its natural color, Sarah added, the galaxy thought we were primitive because we spent so much time playing games and telling stories. They never realized we were actually running the longest military training program in history, we just disguised it as entertainment. The war for Earth was over. But humanity's reputation was just beginning to spread through the stars, carried by tales of the species that turned games into weapons and imagination into victory. And in distant parts of the galaxy, other civilizations began to wonder, what else might humans be capable of? The enemy within. The captured Kraxan flagship's command center had been converted into an impromptu conference room. Sarah Chen sat across from Admiral Vextal, whose earlier bluster had been replaced by a wary respect. Between them, Ixil acted as both translator and cultural interpreter. So, Sarah said, shall we discuss why the Empire really sent a science fleet disguised as an invasion force? Vextal's facial scales shifted, their equivalent of a grimace. You continue to demonstrate why your species concerns us. How did you deduce this was a science fleet? The weapon configurations were wrong, Sarah replied. Your ships carried too many sensor arrays, too many specialized scanning systems. This wasn't an invasion, it was a research expedition that got out of hand. Among my people, Vextal said slowly, such deception would be considered dishonorable. Yet you seem more amused than angry. Before Sarah could respond, Lieutenant Rodriguez burst into the room. Commander. We have a situation. Multiple unauthorized transmissions detected from within Earth's defense network. Sarah's amusement vanished. Source. That's the problem, ma'am. They're coming from our own command frequencies. Someone inside the defense network is sending encrypted data to, somewhere. Not somewhere, Ixil interrupted, their antennae rigid with alarm. The transmissions are aimed at the void between spiral arms. Where the real Kraxan war fleet waits. The room erupted in chaos. Vextal rose, scales flushing with anger or embarrassment. The science expedition was genuine, but we are not the only faction within the Empire interested in humanity. Sarah was already moving. Rodriguez, full communications blackout. Dr. Venn. The engineer's face appeared on a nearby screen. Already on it, Commander. But we've got another problem. Someone's trying to sabotage the modified mining drones. The control systems are being overridden. How long until we lose control? Hours, maybe less. Whoever's doing this knows our systems intimately. Sarah turned to Vextal. Your war fleet, how long until they arrive? If they receive the transmission? Less than 12 hours. And I assume they won't be interested in studying us. No. The military faction seeks to eliminate potential threats, not understand them. Sarah allowed herself exactly 3 seconds to feel the weight of the situation. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded humanity's most improbable victories. Lieutenant, get me a channel to all Earth forces, civilian and military. Dr. Ven, don't try to stop the sabotage, help it along. Commander. Ven looked confused. Whoever's working against us expects us to fight like a military. So let's remind them how humans really operate. If they want our drones, let's give them drones they'll never forget. Understanding dawned on Ven's face. Like a virus. Once they take control. Exactly. And Admiral? Sarah turned to Vextal. Your science fleet is about to witness something even more interesting than human adaptability. You're going to see what happens when humans stop improvising and start planning. The war fleet is larger than anything you've faced, Vextal warned. Hundreds of ships, all with genuine military armaments. Perfect, Sarah replied. That means they'll be expecting a proper battle. Lieutenant, get me Earth's gaming servers. All of them. Gaming servers? Ixil asked. Millions of humans spend their free time solving complex tactical problems for fun. Now they're going to help save Earth. And Admiral? Your science fleet is about to get a lot more data about human nature than you ever expected. As the command center erupted into activity, Sarah allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The saboteurs had made one crucial mistake: they'd given humanity time to prepare. And if there was one thing more dangerous than humans improvising under pressure, it was humans with time to get creative. Dr. Ven, she called out. Remember that crazy idea you had about turning the moon into a giant signal reflector? The one you said was too insane to even consider. That's the one. How quickly can you implement it? As Ven's eyes widened with possibility, Sarah turned back to their alien guests. You wanted to study human adaptability? Watch closely. This is where it gets interesting. Operation Thunderstrike. Protocol Omega wasn't a military operation, at least, not in any way the Kraxan would recognize. As Sarah Chen watched the plan unfold, she couldn't help but appreciate the beautiful insanity of it all. Civilian vessels are in position, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. Though I still can't believe we're doing this. The civilian vessels were a motley fleet of repurposed cargo ships, mining vessels, and even a few privately owned space yachts. Each had been hastily modified according to Dr. Ven's specifications, their hulls now bristling with improvised weapons and jerry-rigged shield generators. Status on the Kraxan weapons charge? Sarah asked. 87% and climbing, Ixil reported, their antennae quivering. Commander, even with your modifications, those civilian ships won't survive a direct hit from the fleet's main weapons. Sarah smiled. They don't need to survive a hit. They just need to not be where the Kraxan are aiming. She keyed her comm, all vessels, execute Operation Thunderstrike. Remember, this isn't about fighting fair, it's about fighting human. What followed was perhaps the strangest space battle in recorded history. As the Kraxan fleet powered up their massive energy weapons, expecting to demonstrate overwhelming force, the civilian fleet sprang into action. But instead of forming battle lines or taking defensive positions, each ship began moving in seemingly random patterns. Are they dancing? Ixil asked incredulously. Flash mob formations, Sarah explained. Choreographed by the same team that designs entertainment drone shows. The patterns look random but they're actually synchronized to make targeting impossible. The Kraxan fleet fired their first salvo, massive beams of energy that should have annihilated anything in their path. But the civilian ships, moving in their bizarre ballet, weren't there when the beams arrived. Instead, the energy weapons struck the clouds of metallic debris that Dr. Ven's mining drones had carefully positioned. The result was spectacular. The debris, specially treated with reflective coatings, scattered the energy beams in hundreds of directions. Some reflected back at the Kraxan fleet, others split into smaller beams that the civilian ship's improvised shields could handle. Now, Sarah commanded. Phase 2. The civilian ships suddenly broke their dance patterns, each activating what appeared to be massive industrial magnets. These weren't weapons, they were salvage equipment, designed to collect space debris. But aimed at the Kraxan fleet's now exposed shield generators. Incredible, Ixal whispered. You're using their own energy against them. The shield generators are trying to compensate for the magnetic fields, but the power fluctuations are creating vulnerabilities, Sarah finished. Dr. Venn, you're up. The mining drones, which had been quietly repositioning during the chaos, suddenly activated their modified lasers. Each beam was weak compared to military weapons, but they weren't aiming at the ship's hulls. Instead, they targeted the small gaps in shielding created by the magnetic interference. Alarms blared across the Kraxan fleet as systems began failing in cascading patterns. Their mighty warships, designed to withstand overwhelming force, were being undone by precisely targeted minimal force applied exactly where they were weakest. The Kraxan flagship is hailing us, Rodriguez announced. Put them through, Sarah ordered, straightening her uniform. The screen filled with the image of a Kraxan admiral, their ceremonial armor unable to hide their agitation. This is not warfare. This is chaos. No, Sarah corrected. This is humanity. We don't fight the way you expect because we don't think the way you expect. Every piece of technology you see was designed for something else entirely. We're not warriors by design, we're improvisers by necessity. The experiment was to understand human adaptability, Ixal added, stepping into view. I would say you have your answer, Admiral. The Admiral's expression shifted from anger to something else, perhaps the beginning of understanding. You turned our own power against us using salvage equipment and entertainment programming. That's what humans do, Sarah said simply. We work with what we have. And right now, what we have is your fleet at our mercy, achieved without a single purpose-built weapon. So, shall we discuss terms? As negotiations began, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was humanity's real first contact, not the initial invasion, but this moment of mutual comprehension. The day the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their strength, but their endless capacity to look at any problem and think, well, what if we tried this? The human factor. Science Officer Ixal had never seen anything quite like the Earth facility they'd been brought to. Where Kraxan research centers were pristine and standardized, this place was a chaos of mismatched equipment, improvised workstations, and what appeared to be a vending machine modified to synthesize nanomaterials. Fascinating, they murmured, compound eyes taking in every detail. Commander Chen watched the alien scientist carefully, still not entirely sure whether to trust their defection. You said you had information about the real reason for the invasion, Sarah prompted. We're running out of time. Ixal's antenna twitched, a gesture Sarah was beginning to recognize as anxiety. The Empire isn't here to conquer Earth. They're here to study you. Humans are impossible. Dr. Venn looked up from her workbench, where she was elbow-deep in a dismantled mining drone. Impossible how? Your species adapts too quickly. Evolves too fast. Not biologically, but... Ixal gestured at the jerry-rigged equipment around them. Like this. You take things designed for one purpose and immediately repurpose them for another. The Empire has been watching Earth for decades, trying to understand how you do it. Sarah frowned. That's just human nature. We see a problem, we fix it with whatever's available. Exactly. Ixal's excitement caused their translucent carapace to shimmer. No other known species does this. We research, we develop, we follow established protocols. But humans, you had barely mastered atmospheric flight before you started dreaming of starships. You turn children's toys into tools, entertainment systems into weapons, defeat advanced AI by thinking illogically. It terrifies the Empire. So this invasion is an experiment. They want to understand how humans think, how you adapt. Each attack is designed to test your responses. But they don't understand that by doing so, they're giving you exactly what humans do best with, a challenge to overcome. Dr. Ven had stopped working, her eyes distant. The EMP attack. They thought they were disabling our defenses, but really. They gave you primitive weapons that your soldiers already know how to use creatively, Ixal finished. And now the fleet is gathering for what they think will be a simple orbital bombardment. Sarah's tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, "Commander. Multiple ships decelerating from FTL. Kraxan reinforcements." But Sarah was smiling. "No. Not reinforcements. Dr. Ven, what's the status of those mining drones? Ready to launch. Though I still say this plan is crazy. Crazy is what we do best." Sarah turned to Ixal. "Want to see how humans really fight?" The next hour demonstrated exactly why the Kraxan Empire had been right to fear human adaptability. The mining drones, their industrial lasers modified to act as cutting beams, swarmed out of lunar bases. But instead of attacking the Kraxan ships directly, they began slicing up space debris, creating clouds of shrapnel that the Empire's energy shields weren't calibrated to stop. Civilian communications satellites, reprogrammed with algorithms borrowed from viral marketing software, began broadcasting contradictory signals that confused the Kraxan targeting systems. A team of gamers, using controllers from popular virtual reality systems, piloted retrofitted maintenance pods through the chaos with impossible precision. And in the midst of it all, something unexpected happened. The Kraxan ships, their commanders trained to fight according to strict protocols, began to falter. Their formations broke apart as they tried to deal with threats that didn't fit any known combat doctrine. "Remarkable," Ixal breathed, watching the tactical display. "They're trying to identify the strategic doctrine behind your attacks, but there isn't one. Each human is improvising independently, creating patterns too chaotic to predict." Sarah nodded. "That's how we've survived everything Earth has thrown at us, asteroids, ice ages, our own mistakes. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome. And now." She was interrupted by a priority alert. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice was tense. "Commander, we're detecting energy buildups in the Kraxan fleet. Much bigger than anything they've used so far. They're preparing to demonstrate their full weapons capabilities," Ixal said quietly. "The next phase of the experiment." Sarah's expression hardened. "Well then, it's time to show them our full capabilities too. Dr. Ven, implement Protocol Omega. Let's show the Empire why you should never back humans into a corner." As klaxons began to sound throughout the base, Ixal realized that the real experiment was about to begin, and the results would reshape both human and Kraxan understanding of what was possible in warfare. First Contact's aftermath. Commander Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating above the command center's main console, watching as another red dot winked out of existence. Another civilian transport, gone. The Kraxan warships were methodically hunting down any vessel trying to escape Earth's orbital space. "Status report on the Luna defensive grid," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Lieutenant Rodriguez swiped through several screens before responding. 40% operational, Commander. The electromagnetic pulse from their first strike knocked out most of our newer systems. The old kinetic railguns are still functioning though." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The Kraxan's initial attack had targeted Earth's most advanced defensive installations, using precisely calculated energy weapons to disable what they assumed were humanity's primary defenses. They hadn't bothered with the primitive projectile weapons, a mistake they would soon regret. "Order all remaining Luna batteries to hold fire," she commanded. "Let them think they've neutralized our defenses. And get me Dr. Ven from salvage operations." The main screen flickered to life, showing a disheveled woman surrounded by what looked like a junkyard of spare parts. "Commander. We're a bit busy down here. Doctor, remember that crazy idea you proposed last month? About converting mining drones into weapon platforms. How quickly can you make that happen? The engineer's eyes lit up. The Mark IV mining lasers. They're not nearly as powerful as military-grade weapons, but... She paused, realization dawning. They're also not shielded against electromagnetic interference. They survived the pulse. Exactly. How many can you modify? We have about 300 units in the Tycho facility. Give me 4 hours and a team of welders. You have 2 hours. And doctor? Make them look broken. I want our visitors to keep underestimating us. As the screen went dark, Sarah turned to her tactical officer. What's the status of the Kraxan fleet? Holding position just beyond lunar orbit, Commander. 27 capital ships, roughly 200 support vessels. They seem to be waiting for something. Sarah nodded. The Kraxan were following standard military doctrine: establish orbital superiority, neutralize planetary defenses, then begin systematic conquest. They expected humanity to follow the same playbook, to either surrender or attempt a desperate conventional defense. They didn't understand that humanity had been preparing for this moment ever since they first looked up at the stars and imagined what might come down from them. Every science fiction story, every war game, every paranoid conspiracy theory had added to humanity's collective preparation for alien contact. And while their technology might be inferior, humans had one tremendous advantage: they were really, really good at improvising. Get me a channel to all Earth defense commands, Sarah ordered. And patch in the civilian engineering network. Faces appeared on screens around the command center: military officers, corporate engineers, even a few gaming developers who'd been recruited for their expertise in unexpected problem solving. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, the Kraxan think they've got us figured out. They've disabled our most advanced weapons, cut off our escape routes, and are preparing for a standard orbital invasion. They expect us to either surrender or die bravely in a conventional battle. She paused, allowing herself a fierce grin. Let's show them how humans really fight. The next hour was a blur of activity. Mining drones were hastily retrofitted with improvised weapons. Civilian communications satellites were reprogrammed to act as decoys. A team of college students who'd been working on space debris cleanup presented a plan to turn their magnetic net system into a ship-disabling weapon. And in the midst of it all came the unexpected message that would change everything. Commander. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out. We're picking up a transmission from one of the Kraxan ships. Well, you need to hear this. A new voice filled the command center, speaking in carefully practiced English. Earth Command, this is Science Officer Ixil of the Kraxan Empire. I request immediate asylum. There is something you need to know about why we are really here. Sarah exchanged glances with her officers. This wasn't part of the plan, but if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to the unexpected. Patch them through, she ordered. And someone get Dr. Venn back up here. Something tells me we're going to need to modify those mining drones for a very different purpose. The war for Earth's survival was about to take an unexpected turn, and humanity's greatest strengths, adaptability, creativity, and the ability to turn junk into weapons, would be tested like never before.